Welcome to Your Host with Senator Greg Ball. I'm Jim Coleman, the host of the show. I'm here right now with the hardest working man in Albany, Senator Greg Ball. How are you doing today, Senator Ball?
Thought it was you.
Good. Well, it's you.
You know, the name of the show is Your Voice, and you're hosting, and you already took over the show. You called it Your Host. Next week will be Your Jim Coleman.
Your voice with Senator Greg Ball. Senator Ball, you look like John Kennedy.
God bless. I love you.
Well,
do you know that?
We've got a special friend here.
We do.
Where's your rocking chair?
Talk about Jack Kennedy.
We are here today with County Executive Rob Astorino.
How are you doing, Jim?
Rob, I'm doing well.
Senator, good to see you.
We got that on tape, too. Good to see you.
How's Sheila and the kids doing?
Kids are good. My daughter turned 7, and my son is 8. My other one's 2, so it's active in the Astorino household.
That's great.
Yeah,
Fantastic. We appreciate everything that you're doing down in Westchester.
Thank you.
Trying to control
Busy.
property taxes, and you're just doing a fabulous job.
Well, it's getting harder and harder because, and I know Senator is working with us on the mandates and all those kind of things. So it's getting harder and harder because next year, for instance, we're going to have a $30 million increase in just 2, pensions and Medicaid.
That's tough.
And so you got to find $30 million elsewhere in the budget just to stay even.
Right.
And we have cut taxes the first year and had a 0% increase the second year, so we've stayed in the cap.
Right.
But it's difficult, because then you're dealing with services.
Sure. What do you think of the governor's big budget?
I think he went in the right direction in many ways. He's trying to rein in spending, which has to happen in this state.
Mm-hmm.
Can he go much further? I believe he can.
Right.
But that, you have to deal with the Senate, you have to deal with the Assembly and all the competing interests and the New York City bloc, which doesn't want anything cut.
Right.
So it's a balancing act, I understand that.
Right.
But, I certainly think he can go a little further.
Mm-hmm.
I hope he does. But I think it's a good start, and I think he's going in the right direction.
Well, that's great. What do you think, Senator Ball, of the upcoming proposed budget from the governor?
I think when it reminds me of when Governor Spitzer was here, he came out and said, look, you can't move the battleship in New York State government overnight. And during that budget process, actually folded to Shelley Silver and that New York City contingent and passed a budget increase at that time, which I believe was the largest increase in state spending at that time. This governor seems to has remarkably moved the state and the conversation in the right direction. I don't know how he's, perfectly honest, I don't know how he's been able to do it with Shelley Silver, but he has been able to do it. I agree with Rob. There are more marked departures from the norm that could be made. I would like to see deeper cuts in state governmental operating expenditures and fair across the board cuts. As a legislator, what you don't like to see are people coming in from community organizations, some of which get cut by 5%, some that see an increase, and then some that get cut by 90%, and to see inequity in the system. So everybody understands it's a tough time. People are willing to shoulder those responsibilities for the most part. So I think a deeper, fair, more equitable cut across the board is in tune. And just like we're not always going to have Rob, hopefully you'll be there for a very long time, but he's not always going to be Westchester County Executive. We're not always going to have Governor Cuomo. We're not always going to have a majority like we do in the Senate. So we need to make those changes now to get that battleship shifting back in the right direction.
You put that system in place.
Well, I know, Senator Ball, you've done a fabulous job in leading in the Senate. I know in the past, the Senate worked on trying to close a budget gap, $14 billion by raising taxes. This time around, it didn't happen. What do you think of that?
Sometimes you wonder whether, as a voter, whether elections matter. We've seen some pretty close elections, but this seat decided the balance of power. And previously, the previous majority, there's a lot of backdoor borrowing. There's over $14 billion in new taxes and fees, and there's a lot that we need to do. I mean, look, we instituted a property tax cap. That's forcing the issue of unfunded mandate relief, but that needs to be dealt with in a real way. We even have issues with MS4, and as from a requirement and regulation perspective, that's really only an issue in our region that needs to be dealt with. But there are a host of unfunded mandates that need to be addressed. But the repeal of the MTA payroll tax, the lowest middle class tax rate, and I think it was 58, 59 years, all these things, a balanced budget, an on-time budget was actually early in the Senate, that would not have happened had this governor been forced to deal with the previous majority, where you had all these little fiefdoms working against each other.
Just on that MTA tax, I think down in Westchester County, about 25,000 businesses were impacted by getting relieved of that MTA tax, which was just outrageous to have on our businesses.
Yeah, the county, we joined the lawsuit with other suburban counties in suing to get that repealed, and so you did most of it. I mean, the county still has to pay our MTA tax over $1 million, so it's still onerous on us.
So it's like
but
a
for the
double
most
tax
part,
on the taxpayers.
yeah, it is. It definitely is. But for the most part, you know, anything that you repeal is good. You know,
Right.
we just wanted to go the distance, but that was a good start.
It's a remaining 20%, and we have to continue to work on that, because one of the things is that because 80% of the folks are taken out of it, now the fervor behind getting rid of the remainder of that tax, it was an insidious tax.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just patently ridiculous to be taxing the job creators and jobs in a hemorrhaging economy, and to be bailing out an institution that needs to be held accountable. We still need the forensic accounting and the MTA to make sure that we can find the savings so we can completely eliminate the tax.
Rob, you've talked about that the 2% property tax cap is good. However, Albany's still forcing, with all of the mandates, 5%. So municipalities and counties are out there really struggling. What's your opinion on that, and share some insight?
Well, I think the property tax cap is half of the equation, because it really comes down to a math problem now. So forcing the issue, as the senator said, forcing the issue of some spending cuts and everyone to really look and live within their means, that's good, and it's happening now. But what's going to happen real soon, and you can see it and feel it right now on the local levels, it's bubbling up, and you're going to get an interesting test in May when the school budgets go up.
Right.
Because already it's doom and gloom, teacher layoffs, bigger class sizes, you know, so everyone's flipping out a little bit to stay within the cap, because remember, schools have to get a 60% vote to override the cap, as opposed to some politicians is voting to, you know, to override it. So I think what's going to happen for a year, people are going to be able to live with it. Shortly thereafter, including the counties, it's going to be literally impossible. And I'll give you an example. We have $30 million in new two programs, Medicaid and pension. $30 million. By law, if we were to raise taxes 2% of the tax cap, we could raise $11 million. So it doesn't fit. And sooner rather than later, there's going to be revolts and riots, because it's going to be impossible to do. You can only cut so much, and then we bump up against other mandated programs, which requires us to hire back more people, which bloats the pension system and our Medicaid costs and all that stuff. So good first step, but it's an asterisk. It becomes a scam if it's not fixed the right way, and mandate relief, which is just Albany spending and sending a bill. And so that's got to be part of the equation.
Rob, on the Medicaid end, I know that you're speaking to other legislators. What's the message that's being delivered on Medicaid?
I think there's been an inching forward by the governor of a partial reduction to a real hard cap. So it would be a 2% increase for us counties, and this only affects counties. Local taxpayers don't have to pay this, and this is the only state now where it's split between the state and the municipal or local government. And for us, Medicaid cost is over about $220 million. That's a lot of money. That's 40 cents of every property tax dollar just goes back to Albany. And we have no say in the administration, on the eligibility, on anything. So I don't know if you were one of the co-sponsors, I don't remember, but there was a bill to take over Medicaid over an 8 or 10 year period, which I believe should happen, a phase in. The state should take back its own program and pay for it if they want to do it. But I think the governor's, dipping his toe in the water and saying, we'll bring it down to 2% increase, then 1% increase, and then a hard cap where it won't go up anymore. That helps a little bit, but it's still a big enchilada.
Senator Ball's called for some making sure that we have direct and real mandate relief in that program. What do you think of that, Senator Ball?
I mean, it's one of the things that I've said is that we're going to have a state takeoff first. Things like Albany having more hundreds of millions of dollars to spend.
Yeah, I know.
It's a little scary for me. And the other thing is a name like, certain county executives are not as fiscally responsible as Westchester is lucky to have. So we would, I would like to see it be tied to direct tax relief to the taxpayers. But I think, thank God we're finally having these conversations.
That's right.
Which we haven't been seeing in a long time. It was all gimmicks and behind the scenes. And at the end of the day, we have got to make the state more hospitable to the job creators and to the small business owners who are struggling out there.
And if these onerous taxes continue to spiral, then nobody's going to set up a shop here.
You're right.
Why would they?
Wouldn't come
And the
here.
problem is once a bill is passed and it becomes law, it's almost impossible to get rid of it. I mean, it takes beyond strong will. I mean, the stars were aligned for the MTA, but that was part of a bigger negotiation.
Right.
But once you put something in, just look at the
Grows
numbers in
and
the
grows.
Assembly. They're never, it's almost against their own interest to cut Medicaid, and so they won't.
Right.
And yet it's going to continue to balloon and balloon and balloon.
On the job creation side, what are you seeing in Westchester County? Do you feel that we're starting to come back online, or?
We've been playing defense for 2 years where we're just trying to keep the jobs that are there and not have them flee to Connecticut or Jersey or somewhere else. And we've had some success in working with the state to give some incentives. But I think there's still way too many empty storefronts on main streets everywhere.
Right.
Where it's
See
just,
that in
it's
White Plains.
everywhere,
different.
everywhere.
Not- yeah.
No matter where you go. And it's just because, they can't afford it anymore. And the taxes are killing them. The regulations from New York State, it's not your purview necessarily, but the regulations are strangling them. And so until that business climate change in perception and in reality, maybe the perception is first, but the reality's got to be there too. We're gonna lose. We're gonna lose to the southern states that are bringing people in. We might even lose to Jersey, and we are losing to Connecticut.
pretty sad,
I
isn't
know.
Senator Ball's called for a 2% max on spending.
State spending.
To have it to where it's more focused on the taxpayers' Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
What do you think of that, Senator Ball? How's that going to shake out this session?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we told the locals, look, you have to cap taxes. I think if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. It would be a huge statement, and knowing that we're not always going to have the checks and balances at the state level that we have now, but we're putting a statewide taxpayer Bill of Rights similar to what Colorado did quite a few years back. The other thing on the job creation front has been working very aggressively with the governor on the Governor Sage Commission, the Spending and Government Efficiency Commission, saying how can we actually begin to expedite the processes for some of these small business owners. They're very similar examples, like simple examples like WIC. Right. You could be a family-owned retailer, supermarket, have 30, 40 stores, no violations whatsoever, and you have to go through that horrific process again with every store that you open up. And this inhibits, job creation. Not only that, when a store goes out, in order to go back through that permit process, you have communities that are totally walled off from nutritious, affordable food, because of that regulatory process.
And you take the other WIC, W-I-C-K, which is the WIC's law, which basically balloons payments for building and construction for public authorities and public school districts, et cetera, in construction costs by 25–30%.
When you're talking about unfunded mandates, what would you say are the top 5?
Medicaid is the number one that's got to be tackled. Pension costs, although long term you have to start somewhere, and that's why I think the Tier 6 is important. Early intervention affects only counties because we have to pay. With little say, we have to pay for the children before they go to school, and then the school districts take it up. But I think we've got to stay focused, and I think, focus on a couple that we can actually make some changes instead of being all scattered and let everyone pick and choose and nothing will get done. So I think Medicaid is number one, or maybe tied with pensions. Both of them are just big, big drains and getting bigger and bigger.
Right. Well, we've got a lot to do this session, and it sounds like you've given us
to
some
work.
homework. Well, we're just about ready to wrap up. We are pleased to have you here today, County Executive Astorino. Thank you again for
Thanks,
being
Greg.
on our show.
Good seeing you. Thanks for all your work.
Thank you.
Thanks
You
for
too.
your partnership with Senator Ball.
Thank you.
It's
Thanks,
a pleasure
Jim.
having you. Senator Ball, thank you so much. Would
You
you like
did an
to
amazing job. Who did I look
learn
like
from the
again?
best?
You said Jack.
John Kennedy.
Okay.
A famous man.
This is my favorite show.
This is it. We've had a wonderful show today. We've got Senator Ball, the hardest working man in Albany, and the hardest working man in Westchester County, working together as partners. It's a pleasure to have both of you here today. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thanks.